Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Layla June West, and I'm a senior English major and Africana Studies minor from Chicago, Illinois.
And my name is Sukaina Juve. I'm a freshman biology major and chemistry minor from Dakar, Senegal.
Sukaina and I are but two of the thousands of students impacted intellectually and culturally by Freshman Seminar in the College of Arts and Sciences each year. Throughout the semester, students have the fortune of hearing lectures from faculty exemplars, many of whom are here tonight, and each of whom help us understand the history of knowledge production by peoples of African descent and guide us on our paths to becoming transformative knowledge workers in our own right.
Tonight's event is sponsored by the College of Arts and Sciences, its freshman seminar program. It is our pleasure to introduce the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, Dr. Bernard Mayer, who will offer a brief welcome to our guests, even as we imagine that each of you is fully at home at Howard University. His remarks will be followed by greetings from Dr. Anthony Wutaw, Provost and Chief Academic Officer of the University. Dean Bernard Mayer.
Well, are you excited? Yes. All right, okay. It is my distinct pleasure this evening, on behalf of the students, faculty, and staff of the College of Arts and Sciences, to welcome each and every one of you to an evening with Ta-Nehisi Coates. Ta-Nehisi Coates. Ta-Nehisi Coates. My apologies. I have a little bit of nerves, right? Okay. But this evening marks the launch of Mr. Coates' 2015 speaking tour. It celebrates his return to his academic home. The publication of his latest book, Between the World and Me, and his recent National Genius Award. We thank Mr. Coates for devoting such a significant portion of his time today to meet with our students, faculty, and staff, and for being with us this evening to share his insightful ideas and understanding of social issues that face us at this moment in time. Indeed, we are proud to remind you and the world that Howard University is one of the critical places where Mr. Coates honed a powerful voice that now has gained national and international recognition. The intellectual and cultural bouillabaisse of our singularly unique campus became the laboratory for his learning and experimentation with social norms and cultures. Many of the formative moments that he recounts in his book occurred in our College of Arts and Sciences, and as he described to us, in the library in which he spent much time. He interacted with many of our distinguished faculty, such as Ron Walters, Linda Haywood, Alvin Thornton, T.P. Mahadevan, Jules Harrell, and Russell Adams, who pushed him to see how the vista of life experiences connected so many of our students across time and space to other minds, hearts, and lives. Mr. Coates made extensive use of the Moreland Spingarn Research Center in the library during his tenure here, and there he explored the work of earlier generations of Howard scholars, such as Chancellor James Williams. It is interesting to note, and I had the distinct opportunity of meeting his father and mother, who are proud associates of the Howard family. It is interesting to note that his father, Paul Coates, was a member of the library staff and shared those same works with other students and researchers who were in pursuit of the collective wisdom of a global people. Tonight, Mr. Coates caps a formal return to the Mecca, having spent the last 8 hours forging a link with the new generation of students searching for their own voices. Unlike his previous returns, today marked a reunion that we have prepared for by integrating a work, his book, that has turned the nation's conversation on race on its ear. Since August, over 1,000 of our freshman students in our college have, under the tutelage of our freshman seminar leadership team, read, analyzed, discussed, and written about Between the World and Me. And I understand they did have serious questions for him in their meeting this morning. I would like to actually applaud the organizers and teachers of the freshman seminar, Dr. Dana Williams and Dr. Greg Carr. And also recognize the students who have been such diligent and engaged students in that course. And the support faculty, graduate students and other faculty who support that seminar enterprise. With a growing acclaim that has rightly accrued to Mr. Coates' words and works, a MacArthur Genius Fellowship among them, a new generation beyond our campus has begun to recognize the open secret that many have known for some time. Between the world and students like Ta-Nehisi Coates sits Howard, her sister HBCUs, and the transformative power of learning deeply, informed by and grounded in an age-old complex and ever-growing culture. So, on behalf of the College of Arts and Sciences, again, I extend a warm welcome to each and every one of you, and to Ta-Nehisi Coates, welcome home.
Good evening. I'm Anthony Wuta, and I serve as the provost at Howard University. And on behalf of our president, Dr. Wayne Frederick, who is on travel, it is my deep honor and my pleasure to welcome each of you to this evening. Earlier tonight, we had the opportunity to celebrate with Mr. Ta-Nehisi Coates a reception in his honor, and he made a couple of comments regarding his formative years in Baltimore and what led him to write this book. And in addition to honoring and acknowledging his parents, who obviously were very great influences on him, he commented on how this book would not have been possible without his experiences here at Howard University, and how Howard University helped to form him and shape him and direct his thoughts, connections with faculty and students and other folks he met here at Howard. And so as a professor and as a university administrator, few things give us as much joy and as much pleasure as seeing one of our students go on to achieve their dreams and to go on to achieve great things that are acknowledged, not just here in this country, but throughout the world. Mr. Coates is a true son of Howard University. He has taken his experiences here at Howard and has shared them with the country and with the rest of the world. And we are deeply honored and indebted that he has chosen to come back home to have a conversation with you and our students and to share some of his thoughts and his views about the way forward. I'm really proud and pleased of our students who are here, because I see in his an example what our students can aspire to be, and I see in his example the greatness that is within each of our students that we hope to help them achieve here at Howard. So again, I want to just thank you for your presence, thank you for your support, and look forward to an exciting evening tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mayer and Dr. Wuta. Allow us to make a few housekeeping announcements. Tonight's event is being live streamed and broadcast live on WPFW and taped by C-SPAN and Democracy Now! You are welcome to use your social media throughout the event, but please silence your cell phones now.
Tonight's format has been structured as a conversation with Ta-Nehisi Coates, with Dr. Greg Carr as his interlocutor. Following the conversation will be a 20-minute question and answer session, which we are restricting to students only. Following the question and answer session, Mr. Coates will be available to sign copies of Between the World and Me. Signed copies of the book are available for purchase in the lobby. To ensure that everyone who desires to have a book signed can do so, we ask that you refrain from requests for pictures or for personalized signings.
With those small but important details out of the way, please welcome Dr. Dana Williams, Chair of the Department of English and co-coordinator for Freshman Seminar, to frame tonight's conversation with Dr. Greg Carr and Mr. Ta-Nehisi Coates.
Good evening. And thank you to Layla and Sukaina. Tonight, we are pleased to be joined by our scholar in residence and son of Howard, Ta-Nehisi Coates. His day-long scholar in residency as a part of the College of Arts and Sciences Freshman Seminar and the first-year writing programs is preceded in recent years by Ngugi wa Thiong'o, when 1,000 freshmen read Something Torn and New, and by Nobel laureate Wale Soyinka, when 1,000 plus freshmen read Of Africa. This year is a unique one for Freshman Seminar in the college, in the sense that for the first time, we selected 2 books as required reading for the class of 2019. Claudia Rankine's Citizen and Ta-Nehisi Coates' Between the World and Me. We were confident in our choice, but we had it reaffirmed at the National Book Festival when Rankine suggested during the question and answer session that she'd be interested in putting the 2 books in conversation. Of course, the students from Freshman Seminar who went to the book festival were all too happy to tell her when they had their books signed that here at Howard, we were doing just that. Tonight's conversation, too, is unique. As Dean Mayer remarked, and as Ta-Nehisi has said repeatedly throughout the day, only at Howard is this conversation possible. Here, not only have the students learned the meaning of his name, the land of Nahasi, or the Nubians, but they learned this from Dr. Mario Beatty, one of the foremost scholars of Medu Neter, or Egyptian hieroglyphs, in the country. Dr. Beatty is being modest. I'll ask him to stand and wave, please. There he is in the back. It really is a beautiful thing to pass by my office and see 40+ students sitting everywhere, actually learning the glyphs, reading them, writing, and making the translations so that we can talk to ourselves, as Dr. Carr says often, without translators. Only at Howard can these students study Medu Neter as one of many African languages. And only at Howard, as Ta-Nehisi noted today, do you feel like you've been punched in the face by 18-year-olds who read your book closely, carefully, not as a passing fancy, but as a matter of pride, of dignity, and struggle, and survival, and being, and all of whom reaffirm that we have left the future, or are leaving the future, in good hands. Finally, only at Howard, and perhaps at her sister HBCUs, would the conversation that you are about to witness be possible, because Dr. Greg Carr works only at Howard. And only Howard is Ta-Nehisi's Mecca. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Dr. Greg Carr and our scholar in residence, Ta-Nehisi Coates. Greg Carr is Associate Professor of Africana Studies and Chair of the Afro-American Studies program at Howard University and adjunct faculty in the Howard School of Law. This son of an HBCU, Dr. Carr earned his BA in Theater Arts from Tennessee State University. He also holds a PhD in African American Studies from Temple University and a Juris Doctorate from The Ohio State University College of Law. He has been named Professor of the Year 3 times by the Howard University Student Association, and he was also named Male Professor of the Year at the 4th Annual HBCU Awards. A brilliant scholar and a master teacher, he's represented Howard as a spokesman in a wide range of print and electronic media, including the New York Times, the Washington Post, USA Today, MSNBC, National Public Radio, BBC America, C-SPAN, and CNN, as well as a host of local radio, television, and internet media outlets. Dr. Greg Carr. Ta-Nehisi Coates needs no introduction, but this is an HBCU and I have good home training. The official biography, as sent to us by his publicist, says he is the national correspondent for The Atlantic and author of the #1 New York Times bestseller, Between the World and Me. Between the World and Me was long-listed for the 2015 National Book Award. He is also a recipient of the MacArthur Fellowship. Yes. And he has received awards from the National Magazine, the Hillman Prize for Opinion and Analysis Journalism, the George Polk Award for his Atlantic cover story, The Case for Reparations. He lives, yes. He lives in New York, and for a short time this year in France with his wife and son. Ta-Nehisi, welcome home.
Can you read from up there? You're home, brother. So, before we start this bit of a conversation and then open it up to students, Brother Coates has agreed to read a few passages from this beautiful book. So I think we can all agree that we want to hear that, right? Please, brother. Yes.
I have to do that everywhere I go. Pearls of being tall. Thank you for having me back at Howard University. It is a privilege. This is actually the beginning of my book tour. And I realized that we had a small reception before here, and I realized that I had gotten it backwards. I wanted to start at Howard University, but I should have finished at Howard University because everything after this is just downhill. This will not happen again for me in the next 6 weeks. Won't be like this. And you know, the moment I realized it was, and I've been remarking on this all day, I was answering some questions this morning for the students, and my friend Rachel, who's down there, hi Sunday, how you doing? We were there, we were answering these questions, and we were, listening. And the first cat that asked the question was tight, and I was like, okay, that's a good question. Then the second cat asked the question, and I started answering. I had to pause for it. I said, these are some really good questions. Now, I've been on national media. I done talked to, Meet the Press, done Fresh Air. I mean, these some, top journalists, Charlie Rose. They had nothing on the undergraduates here. I mean, I'm not even, it's not even. Because you see, what you usually have to do during the course of the interview is you have to start at Intro to Black Studies. That's the question level, But this was PhD level Black Studies. That's what it's like, a graduate seminar, man. It was a couple times I got caught up. I just had to look at folks and say, I don't know. I just don't know. They said, but you wrote that. I just wrote it, that's it. And so what I think that speaks to, though, is the angle that we have of the world that you learn here. And a viewpoint of the world that you really can't get other places. And I've been trying to speak about this I tried to speak about it in the book, but I've tried to speak about this all day, and I'll continue to speak about it when I'm asked about Howard. I saw a video, and I mentioned this morning, a couple years ago when Rand Paul came here and just got his butt handed to him. And I thought about how, it was a point where he was trying to lecture students here about the history of the Republican Party, and I thought, nobody talked to you. Nobody warned you. Nobody told you where you were going. Nobody told you that they live this. This is what they do. And you coming into their house trying to, give a lecture to folks. And I think, part of that is the treasure that's here at Howard University is so easy to miss by, for lack of a better term, mainstream standards. It's not in the GPA, which is cool, It's not in the SAT scores. It's not in the GRE. It's not in the LSAT. You would have to sit here and just, be among the folks to see it. It's in, as I was saying at the reception, it's in the massive compression of wisdom that you get here. That comes from just, sitting out on the yard and seeing the wide array of people, who refer to themselves as black folks, There was a sister this morning who was asking a question if she was from Iowa, and I was remembering, I can't remember the city, but I think it was Sioux Falls. And I was thinking back how when I first came here, I would meet black people from places like that, and I would think, I didn't even know there were black people there. And you get to, you get knowledge on that, and you get knowledge from your professors, and you do as I did, walk over to Moreland Spingarn to get more knowledge, and that all compresses into a particular worldview. And my job was to, really try to capture that worldview. So one of the things, questions I've gotten, and people always ask me about the book, they say, well, why is your book so bleak? Now, that's not a question I got this morning. I didn't get that at all. They say, why is your book so bleak? Why is there no hope in the book? And I think, people miss it. There's plenty of hope. The hope is in Howard University. That's where all the hope is in the book. And that's not a mistake. That's not a mistake, because one part of the book is about what folks have done to us, but there's another part of the book that's about what we ourselves have done. So I'm just going to read a couple pages towards the end in my attempt to capture that wisdom that you get from Howard University. This comes at a point after I had interviewed Dr. Mabel Jones, who is here with us tonight. There are too many bright lights. I can't see where Dr. Jones would be. Okay, Dr. Mabel Jones, who's right there. You guys would just give Dr. Jones a hand, please. Thank you, Dad. This is Dr. Jones' Prince Jones' mom. And this book would not have been possible without Dr. Jones being willing to give her time and talk to me about a very, very painful subject. And I knew the conversation was going to be deep when I went down. But then after I, got out, and I don't even think she knows this, I sat in the car for 10 minutes. Just trying to understand what exactly had happened. And this section begins right after that conversation, and then it proceeds into, me thinking back about my time at Howard. After I left, I sat in the car idle for a few minutes. I thought of all that Prince's mother had invested in him and all that was lost. I thought of the loneliness that sent him to the Mecca, and how we could not save him. How we ultimately cannot save ourselves. I thought back on the sit-ins, the protesters with their stoic faces, the ones I had scorned for hurling their bodies at the worst things in life. Perhaps they had known something terrible about the world. Perhaps they so willingly parted with their security and sanctity of the black body because neither security nor sanctity existed in the first place. And all those old photographs from the 1960s, all those films I beheld of black people prostrate before clubs and dogs were not simply shameful, indeed were not shameful at all. They were just true. We are captured, brother, surrounded by the majoritarian bandits of America. And this has happened here in our only home, and the terrible truth is that we cannot will ourselves to an escape on our own. Perhaps that is the hope of the movement, to awaken the dreamers, to rouse them to the facts of what their need to be white, to talk like they are white, to think that they are white, which is to think that they are beyond the design flaws of humanity has done to the world. But you cannot arrange your life around them and the small chances of the dreamers coming into consciousness. Our moment is too brief. Our bodies are too precious. And you are here now, and you must live. And there is so much out there for you to live for, not just in someone else's country, but in your own home. The warmth of the dark energies that drew me to the Mecca, that drew out Prince Jones, the warmth of our particular world is beautiful, no matter how brief and breakable. I think back to our trip to homecoming. I think back to the warm blast rolling over us. We were at the football game. We were sitting in the bleachers with old friends and their children, caring for neither fumbles nor first downs. I remember looking toward the goalpost and watching a pack of alumni cheerleaders so enamored with Howard University that they had donned their old colors and took out their old uniforms just a little bit so that they would fit. I remember them dancing. They'd shake, freeze, shake again, and when the crowd yelled, "Do it, do it, do it," a black woman 2 rows in front of me in her tightest jeans stood and shook as though she was not somebody's mama. And the past 20 years had barely been a week. I remember walking to the tailgate party without you. I could not bring you, but I have no problem telling you what I saw. The entire diaspora around me. Hustlers, lawyers, cappers, busters, doctors, barbers, deltas, drunkards, geeks, and nerds. The DJ hollered into the mic. The young folks pushed toward him. A young man pulled out a bottle of cognac and twisted the cap. A girl with him smiled, tilted her head back, imbibed, and laughed. And I felt myself disappearing into all of their bodies. The birthmark of damnation faded, and I could feel the weight of my arms, and I could hear the heave in my breath, and I was not talking then because there was no point. That was a moment, a joyous moment beyond the dream, a moment imbued by a power more gorgeous than any voting rights bill. This power, this black power, originates in a view of the American galaxy taken from a dark and essential planet. Black power is the dungeon side view of Monticello, which is to say the view taken in struggle. And black power births a kind of understanding that illuminates all the galaxies in the universe in their truest colors. Even the dreamers, lost in their reverie, feel it. For it is Billy that they reach for in sadness. And Mobb Deep is what they holler in boldness. And Isley is what they hum in love. And Dre is what they yell in revelry. And Aretha is the last sound they hear before dying. We have made something down here. We have taken the one-drop rule of dreamers and flipped them. They made us into a race. We made ourselves into a people. Here at the Mecca, under pain of selection, we have made a home, as do black people on summer blocks marked with needles, files, and hopscotch squares. As do black people dancing it out at rent parties. As do black people at their family reunions where we are regarded like the survivors of catastrophe. As do black people toasting their cognac and German beers, passing their blunts and debating MCs. As do all of us who have voyaged through death to life upon these shores. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. For those of you who read the book, you understand that Brother Ta-Nehisi started at the end, but in many ways, that's the beginning in some ways, it seems. In the 2 master classes you held today, the students continued to come back to this theme of collective struggle and individual identity and how the two fit together. One of the themes that began to emerge that you really kind of helped them tease out is the distinction between race and culture, or ethnicity as you talk about it. What you just read gestures toward the idea of responsibility. Is there a political dimension? Because I know at least one student asked you, what should we do? And of course, you answered in a way, you said, I'm not a prophet, I'm not putting words in your mouth, but what is the responsibility of a nation that has formed itself in part out of a response to racialization? Do we have a responsibility to each other?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I just think the very fact that any opportunity, I mean, I'll just speak for myself, any opportunity I have to be here, to be honored by, you fine folks, it's nice to hear all of those, great accolades that, MacArthur, et cetera, awards. That's very nice. But all I hear is like the people who sacrificed so you could be there in the first place. Struggle is how you pay those folks back. One of the major themes I try to get to in the book is this idea of, okay, what if you do the math and you do all the logic and you go through everything and you say, man, it looks really, really bleak here. What is your responsibility? And my answer in that is that your responsibility is to, struggle, or to use another word, to resist, period, bottom line. That is your responsibility, because the only reason you even had the ability to ponder those questions in that sort of way is because other people struggled before you. One of the examples I give, I try to talk to people about, is that the period of enslavement in this country is 250 years, okay? That's a long time. It's a long, long time. It means that you had generations upon generations upon generations upon generations of black folks who were, just born into enslavement. And so if you were born as an African American, say in 1750 in Virginia, I mean, you could look back into parents, grandparents, great-grandparents and see nothing but enslavement. And then you can look forward, generation after generation, all the way up to 1860, 110 years later, and you see nothing but generation of enslavement. Where is the hope in that? I mean, that's just what the history teaches us. I mean, where is the hope in Ida B. Wells giving, the lion's share of her life fighting for an anti-lynching bill that never came? And the Senate couldn't apologize until I think like 2004. Ida B. Wells, long dead, 70 years gone. So the question I try to answer is that the fact of the matter is our focus on, folks like Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement blinds us to the fact that most people who struggle actually never get to see the fruits. And we stand upon the shoulders of people who never got to see, what actually came out of that. It strikes me as the height of selfishness, and selfishness sounds like a too small a word, perhaps arrogance, hubris, to just say, I'm going to go do me now. So I think, it's not mine. Do you understand? Like, it's not mine. It don't belong to me.
That's interesting, brother, because, yeah, absolutely, please. In framing it that way, some of the folks who have read the book and formed some critique, some critical analysis, not negative, try to portray the narrative as a kind of narcissist's travel log. But clearly what you just outlined not only gives the lie to that, it really shows how you're grounded. I mean, at one point you say, I got people. Right. Living people, ancestors, some more your son, and going forward. Now, given that it's clearly not about this kind of just not only a critical self-examination, but connecting to people, then the question, it seems to be another question that students raised today, is how you practice your craft. 20 years ago next week, and those of you who want to have a kick, go to C-SPAN, you can see this video, we were laughing about it. This young brother, a teenager, right over there in Blackburn, Ron Walters, and Sister Pat Walters is here, Ron Walters' widow tonight. Oh yeah, absolutely, the great Ron Walters. Moderated a panel where you were laying out this whole analysis of the structure, man. And hey, pretty good for 19 years old, quietly. I mean, these students, clearly, you're in that tradition. But in doing that, you were spending a lot of time in the books, outside the classrooms, deep in Moreland Spingarn. And today, as students ask you about technique, you walk them through the importance of study in a black space. Could you talk some more about that? About the technique of really immersing yourself in that black space and taking full advantage of that?
Well, I mean, this reception is very nice to be hailed as, a representative, of Howard University, best of Howard University. So that was certainly not how I felt in most of my classes. I did not feel like the best of Howard University. I felt like the worst of Howard University very, very often. And a look at my transcript will verify why one might feel that way. It didn't emerge out of nothing, that sentiment. But what I tell people is that, I was not, the greatest student, but I never stopped studying. I knew, like even now when I think about it, I knew like the questions that I had come here to answer. I was very, very aware of that. And the idea that you had like so much time as a young person, there's just so much time when you're young.
Say some more about that, please.
Well, I mean, it's not always going to be this way.
Yeah, that's right.
It won't always be this way. I mean, you really have no other responsibilities except to study. I mean, it's an amazing point in your life. And I didn't get all I could out of that, but I got a lot. You know, I got a lot, you know, and so I don't know, you know, I wasn't the biggest party. I like parties, but I wasn't, it wasn't like a huge thing, you know, with me. I didn't pledge anything like that, so I wasn't a part of any organization that would have, taken up my time. So what I did was I went over to Moreland Spin Gun, and I just, I got it in, man. And, any, sort of question, I laid out in the book, any sort of question I, had, I would, go pick up the book. And then, as my pops had taught me, you can look at the bibliography, who's this guy citing? And you write that down, you go look at those books. And, you take yourself through it and you listen to the books that your, professors, mention, even if it's not the book they're teaching. A lot of times they'll mention a certain book, you go look that up. Now here's the thing. Half of that stuff I didn't understand. You asked me to give I read Capitalism and Slavery when I was here at Howard. I cannot tell you what the argument in that book is. Like right now, I actually can't, I can't actually really in any sort of concrete way tell you what the argument, in fact, in Wretched of the Earth is. I remember reading the first paragraph and getting stuck, repeatedly.
You're not alone, brother, in that one.
What is going on here? And I just somehow powered my way. I mean, literally just powered through force of will through that book. And, I was just talking to my buddy Rachel about how I need to go back and actually read it as an adult with a much more mature mind, because that joint went shook, and that was half of the books I read. But see, what you're doing though, even in the practice of what you don't understand, is you're practicing, like a craft of studying, analyzing, drawing things out, trying to figure it. So even if you ain't ready for it, I mean, you're sharpening yourself. And that was what I did here, man. And it was a privilege to have that sort of time. It was a privilege to have those sort of resources, a privilege to have, found the library right there, have Moreland right there, to have my professors here, to have, a crew of young, black folks who I was here with, who were sort of pursuing the same question. I mean, because you could go ask your peers about that. You actually say, all right, what was Fanon talking about? And they say, man, I was struggling with that too. I ain't sure. You actually, so you weren't alone. Wow. And it's right. I mean, I know I don't want to be like Howard fanboy, but it's just literally true that can't happen anywhere else. That's not rhetorically true. It's actually true. You just can't really get that other place.
Actually, that's interesting because this is a question that the students didn't raise today, but that triggers something else in me. And by the way, students, be prepared. In a second, we're going to turn this over to you all because Ta-Nehisi said the reason he's here is to talk to y'all. He's been talking to y'all all day, jet lag and everything, coming across the ocean, so we're going to do that in a second. Howard represents a certain intellectual thrust in this country, to be sure. Its sister historically black colleges and universities, particularly the ones, maybe state colleges, the public schools, also have intellectual thrust, but not that kind of similar rich bouillabaisse. Mm-hmm. Collectively, however, when you read that through what you've written, all of those black people are ensconced in a country that you're not sure will survive. One of the things that emerged in the conversation, you evoked the nation state and even questioned the idea of nationalism. The possibilities of the United States in this moment. And I think this speaks, if you haven't read Ta-Nehisi's article in The Atlantic, The Black Family in the Age of Mass Incarceration, that was evoked today. It's not me, is it?
Not me either, bro.
Nah, we good, right? All right. Look, that's part of the black nation, right? You bumped into the dude, you say, my bad, straight. It's all good, we got it. But, well, this is actually a two-part question. It makes me think about something else. What are the most significant turning points, would you say, in the history of this country? The Civil War, I know, has got to be one. You really think about that, right?
That's it.
And ultimately, looking forward, and I'm not asking you to be a prognosticator, how do you imagine this country emptying out over the next couple of generations?
I don't know. That's the second one is easy. I don't know.
Well, let's go back. But then let's go back to the Civil War then, because
okay,
why? Because it's interesting. You talk about taking your son to these battlegrounds, and we were talking. Dr. Williams and I loaded our nephews up a couple of summers ago and took them to a lot of these places. We call it intellectual CSI. Let's go to the crime scenes, right? But the Civil War. Why the Civil War, Ta-Nehisi? Why is the Civil War really preoccupied your imagination?
It was interesting because it wasn't something that preoccupied me at Howard, and it wasn't, as a child, and my mom, my dad's home, it didn't preoccupy me then. It was sort of overlooked, and I think the Civil War presents a philosophical problem because it's this odd mix of a kind of nationalist tradition and an integrationist tradition, because you have violence, I mean, you got like black people doing like real, actual violence. It's a war. It's a war. And so, but at the same time, they're doing violence under the American flag. So the idea of violence as a liberation is very present for that, but it's, in service of integration. It's actually a very, very weird, so it's kind of hard to situate that. So I think that presented some problems in terms of how it was presented to me, but once I got it, I mean, it was fairly thorough because, I mean, what the first thing is, there's a way of talking about black liberation in this country, a very, very moralistic way. And I don't want anybody to take this the wrong way, but I think it's important to interrogate, that holds up Dr. King and the civil rights movement and, puts it up here and uses that as a club to look at how other people, other black people attempt to achieve their liberation. Well, you're not as good as King. Never mind that in King's time, people were saying King wasn't as good as King. I mean, people forget all about that, about what people said about King in his time, but they, it's like up here and, it's used to, and so a lot of that is the discomfort with violence and black violence, to be honest, you know what I mean? There's a great, great, great discomfort with that, Now part of this is me, my dad being out of the Black Panther Party, and me, being immediately exposed to that. And one of the things I say in the book is my attraction to the Panthers was the gun, but it wasn't just the gun as romantic, it was like, they are talking to America in the language that America talks. Like not in like, now what you think about that? Like whether you think like that was the right thing to do or whether you think that was the best road, I mean, certainly there's room for debate. But that certainly was, as I looked out in the world, was the language that America spoke to black people in. And so, I guess, in my studies in it, I, thought that was peculiar to that period, but then you start looking back. You know what I mean? And you see, like how Frederick Douglass talks about the Civil War, and pronouncing himself, happy that there was a war. Yeah. You know what I mean? You start talking to the soldiers, and the soldiers say, man, I was very, very happy that, we did this ourselves. We had to liberate ourselves because then nobody can ever, take it away from the fact that we did this. There's a point, I'll never forget this. As a woman, and she styled herself, she was, abolitionist, very sympathetic white woman to, the plight of enslaved black folks. And she talks about, she ran across this woman who was basically, working in this kind of mammy role. And the woman's daughter, the master had done something really awful to the woman, to beat her or something like that. And this woman had always been kind and pleasant and everything. This is before the Civil War, and the white woman goes to comfort this woman, and the woman takes on this really, as she described in her words, dark aspect, and looks meaner than she's ever seen. And she said, listen, there's a day coming when the white folks' blood going to run in the river, going to run in the street. And she sees this woman in 1865, after the Civil War, the woman says, I told you it's going to happen. She's happy. Yeah. She's happy about, about the violence. And so that to me, I think it represented a profound paradigm shift in how we think about the relationship of violence and nonviolence and liberation. There is no liberation movement. I mean this, and I would defend this even about the 1960s, that can be divorced from violence. That's not a good thing. I don't want people thinking it's cool. I don't want to romanticize that. No. I'm not saying that was in my effort to understand, and that, actually, in fact, that's a very scary thought. It's not an emboldening thought. Brother, it's a deeply, deeply scary thought.
You end the book with the rain.
Right.
I mean, you end the book with, in some ways, a metaphor for a violent external force.
Right.
After reading it through environmentalism, which I thought was very interesting. In other words, the earth doesn't need us.
Right. Right.
But I'm looking at the clock, and let's turn it over to the students, why don't we? Because we could talk about this all night. There are a couple of microphones. We want just a few students only, to come and maybe continue. And for the folks who weren't there earlier, you can get a little bit of the flavor of, man, that was close to 4 hours between those 2 days that we talked. Please, you can go to either one, and then we'll get these few folks, and then we'll move to have everybody get their book signed. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Maya King. I'm a freshman journalism major from Tallahassee, Florida. A lot of what we focused on in the School of Communications is telling our stories, and that's the stories that are about Black people that often aren't told by the general media or the controlling bodies. And I want to know if, as a journalist and as a Black journalist, if you feel you have that responsibility to tell our stories and enter that conversation, and also what we can do as Black students, Black journalists, Black writers to also enter that conversation and do so in a way that actually affects change.
Well, I'll answer the last question first, and I think like, that's a very easy one. You can practice your craft and get better. None of this, like no one is here, this book does not have, it's a fact. I'm not at the Atlantic unless I, can, practice my craft at a certain level. That's really, 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 really important. In fact, it's probably the most important thing. I forgot your first question.
Well, you pretty much answered it, but my second question was you didn't answer my second question.
Yeah, I answered the second. What was your first one?
My first question was, as a Black journalist,
Oh, right. You asked me, did I feel like it was a responsibility?
Yeah.
No, you know what I feel? I feel like it's a privilege. I feel like it's a great, great privilege to cover the things. And again, this is not in a rhetorical sense. This is like, I was saying this earlier in class. Okay, so the United States is distinct among, quote unquote, Western countries or countries, descended from, Europe or however you want to look at that. Because it's a creedal country. It's founded on a belief. And you can take this whether it's actually true or not, but in terms of how it articulated itself, it is founded upon this notion of freedom. You can look at the French Constitution and French Creed and see the same thing, but they have a history before that. This was a country that's supposed to be founded for folks to get away from the oppression of the old world, to be free of all the entanglements, all the corruptions, of the old world. This is literally how people, and folks are laughing, everybody laughs when I say that. But you can read the documents. This is how people talked about what the United States of America was supposed to be. It's the reason de Tocqueville, for instance, comes to the United States and wants to explore it and write about it for France, because there's this new possibility. I'm reading this history right now, the French Revolution, and the guy is arguing that the French Revolution actually begins in America, because there's this purified notion of America as being the font of liberty, the beacon of what the modern world can represent. There is no better perspective to analyze the truth of that, or the falsehood of that, the complexity of that, than from the Black experience. Because it's the other side. You see, it's all the dirt, it's all the grime, it's all the stuff that don't nobody, it's all the mess. And that's where like any person that wants to do any sort of storytelling wants to live, right there in the mess. It's a great, great privilege. I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Thank you.
I'm looking at this line, I'm looking at the clock, so nobody else get up and get in line, and we're going to try to take some of these rapid fire. Why don't we let's go over this side. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Aiden Keys, and I am a freshman English major from Tacoma Park, Maryland. And my question is, so when you go to France and when you go to other countries in Europe, and you talk to the Afro communities there, what do you learn about being an African American in other countries that you wouldn't necessarily have learned in America?
Well, I have to be honest with you. The first thing that I get is my Americanness. It's immediately. Even in my conversation with other people of African descent, it's like this immediate sort of thing. That doesn't mean that there's not a relationship there, a bond there, but it's very, very clear that I'm from a place and I was forged in a place. One of the things that I've noticed, and I've been thinking about this a lot, specifically in France, is that life in America is so much more violent, and thus so much more violent for African Americans in a way that it just isn't in other countries, And again, this goes back to what I was talking about, like this sort of creedal notion. We have these notions of liberty, and they're interpreted in certain ways. And the way they're being interpreted right now is I should be able to stockpile as many guns as I want. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong. The argument that probably could be extended all the way up to a nuclear weapon. If you're thinking about it, right. Seriously. I needed to oppose tyranny. This is what folks say. That notion doesn't exist in the same ways. And so in France, and I'm not trying to brag about France. Please don't go to times you're saying France was better. Please don't take this at all. I'm just, it's just the thing that's striking me right now. Other things will strike me the longer I'm there. But because there are less guns, it's immediately less violent. So when my son takes the subway to school, I worry about all sorts of things happening. I don't worry about him getting shot though. It's just not present. And I think the presence of guns in America is itself tied to views of Black people, and what Black people represent, within the country. I was on a panel this weekend, and I said that, and a sister, who, her parents were from the continent, but she was raised here, and she goes back quite a bit, and she said to me, the comparison that she immediately drew was to South Africa. That was actually the similarity. And she said to me that there's an NRA branch in South Africa. Something I had never realized. She said the dialogue is exactly the same. So I'm at the beginning of my studies in this. I don't have a completed formulation for you, but that's just a little bit of what I got.
That's interesting. That makes sense. It's a settler colony. They definitely are on camp in South Africa.
Right. And also a country founded, in much the same way that the United States was on, the exploitation of black people.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Natalie Koth. I'm a senior human development major, Spanish minor from Cincinnati, Ohio. We are using your book in one of my classes in the School of Education as a basis for critique of the American education system. And my question is two-pronged. So what advice would you give to a student who would like to do independent study to gain knowledge and also needs to balance a structured classroom in order to get their degree at Howard University? And what responsibility do you think HBCUs have to ensure the success of black students in America?
Well, I'll tell you what, I won't even attempt to answer the first question, because I didn't get my degree. So any advice I have for you is really obviously.
You graduated from the Mecca, brother.
Yeah, I did.
You gave Diddy the language now. When you see it on a t-shirt, you should get a copyright for that. God, tell me what he's going to do.
But I obviously did not balance it very well. I mean, that's just, so it would be the height of hypocrisy for me to sit up here and tell you how to do that. As for the second question, I actually feel a little uncomfortable dictating to HBCUs what their responsibilities are. And I don't know why I feel uncomfortable. I'm not an educator. I haven't done much reporting or research on education. And so, I guess I feel like I would be speaking from a position of ignorance. I feel like you probably have a better answer to that question right now, than I do. Hopefully one day I'll have a better answer to that question. I think one of the things about, being a writer is I was attracted to it because it basically allowed me to continue my career as a student. I'm happy that everybody, went in, and that's real. I mean, a big part of writing is researching and learning, and, every single article I publish is actually an excuse for me to go and learn something. It's just, I got to give you something in order to get the knowledge. I would happily keep the knowledge, if I could be paid for that, but that's not how it works. But, I say all that to say that the unfortunate part about sitting on stages like this and about writing books and about writing articles is people sometimes think you know more than you do. And people who write articles like this and write books like this often pretend to know more than they actually do. And so it would do you a disservice for me to do that.
Thank you.
Yes, sir, brother. Oh, let me add, though, that we might try to coax you back up in here to hang out with us as some kind of scholar in residence. Dean, we may work up. We're going to find some money. But you say you're not a teacher now. We're going to bear witness. We're going to bear witness in here. So just know, brother. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Cameron Clark. I'm a junior biology and community health double major from Jersey. Hey, Jersey. I'm interested in living a life without fear. So my question is, how, as you mentioned in the book, how as African Americans, I want to say particularly African American men, but I feel like all of us as a people, how can we collectively be able to live a life without fear in a society where, as you mentioned, you can get shot for carrying a toy in a department store or turning a corner in a dark stairwell? How can we continue to live without fear when our lives can end at a moment's notice?
I don't think you can, though. I don't think you can. You got a lot to be afraid of. You should be afraid. I mean, these are facts. People are not afraid for simple reasons, right? The question is, how do you continue to act in spite of that fear? That's really the question. I mean, you can't, live without it. The question is, how do you keep it from limiting you? How do you keep it from keeping you in a crouch? And one of the things that I have had to accept is that there are certain things in this world which I just have no control over. And I have to, accept that. The things, for instance, that you listed, those are not under my power. But I have to live in spite of those things, right? Because life is so precious. My body is so precious. My brief time on this earth is so precious. And I want to get out of it as much as I can. And I want to see as much as I can. And it goes back to the question, that Dr. Carr asked, when I was talking about this situation, on whose shoulders we stand. Folks acted without fear. in this country for generations upon generations. You know, any privilege I have to even answer that question is built on those folks. So that charges you to act without fear. You know, but you can't be without it. You'll always feel it. You know what I mean? The question comes about what you're going to do after that, you know?
Thank you, brother. Yes, sir.
Good evening. I'm Kedrick Peters. I'm a third-year sociology doctoral student here at Howard. And my question goes into your text. You lament throughout the book addressing your son, working twice as hard notion. What message do we send to our students, in particular those not having access to certain privileges of being in middle class or upper middle class or having parents who went to college? What message do we send to them? So instead of saying working twice as hard, what do we say to those students?
I can just tell you what I say to my son. You know, I'm loath to give, you know, advice for how folks, you know, depending on their situation. I object to the notion of twice as good because they are not the standard. You know, nobody, I just object to that. You know, Howard is not, you know, twice as good as whatever. It has something that is unique and special in and of itself, not in comparison, you know, to somewhere else. It's a particular thing that is all its own. You know, and I think, and maybe that's the key right there. You know, I think you have to regard yourself in that sort of individual way. You have particular gifts that are all your own. And your job is to get as much out of them as you can. You know, regardless of what, you know, these folks over here, you know, are doing, you know? So they're half-assing, you know what I mean? And so you're just gonna go a little bit faster than them. I mean, is that the standard? You know, I totally reject that notion. You know, I think you have to, you know, act out of yourself, out of your own independence of spirit.
Thank you.
Maybe two questions back. She asked about the black college. That reminds me of what Du Bois wrote in The Field and Function of the Negro College. I think you may have helped answer as well what obligation black colleges owe to their students. Exactly that grounding in, yeah, that type of expressing. That's very powerful. Right? Yes.
Hi, good evening. My name is Nathaniel Warner. I'm a freshman chemistry major from Trinidad and Tobago. My question is, there's been a thrust for self-care and unplugging ourselves from the violence and brutality of America towards black people. Do you think this unplugging is necessary or a betrayal to the struggle and the victims?
Wait, can you specify a little bit for me?
Okay, I've seen on Twitter individuals would say that we need to unplug ourselves from seeing the brutal images that always are.
I understand. Like, yes.
Yeah. Do you think this is a betrayal or is it necessary?
Right. So I think what you mean is like, for instance, the cell phone video, folks being shot in the back, you know, people being beaten. Yeah. I don't know. Like, that's a difficult question for me to answer because I have to watch it. It's a, you know, part of my job is to bear witness. You know, I think there's some argument as to whether that normalizes the dehumanization and the brutalization of black bodies, but perhaps that's already happened. It's a little too late to have that conversation. Had that not happened, we wouldn't be seeing the videos in the first place. I don't know that the problem is that, you know, Americans in this country have too much truth about the kind of violence that black folks have. I think it's more so that they have too little. But I don't know. I don't know. That's just my perspective there.
Thank you.
Thanks. We're gonna, again, I'm mindful of the time, brother, so maybe we could do two more from each line. I'm sorry for the folks who are there. Is that all right with you, Wes? Yeah. All right, let's do this, just two more from each line. That puts us over a little, but we'll still have time.
All right.
Yes.
First of all, my name is Chad Graham, Senior Business Management Major, Africana Studies minor from San Diego, California. And first, can we have you back for a writer's workshop? And to speak at commencement.
None of that is up to me. I put it to you like this. I have never been invited to Howard University and not shown up. That's what I'll say.
Chad, I'm going to say this to the world. We have the John and Eula Cleveland Distinguished Chair in Afro-American Studies. And brother, when you can find the time and space to occupy it, and we have the Sterling Allen Brown Chair in English and the Humanities. I think I can speak for Dr. Williams. I know I can speak for us. And the provost is here, and the dean is here. We're going to work that out, okay? All right, so
That's number one. We got you on that, baby. We'll figure it out.
And as for my other question, in the book, you do a good job of situating white supremacy at the heart of this American nation state, not something that kind of came after the idea of America was conceived. But you can also trace white supremacy, racism back to the founding of the Italian nation state and them pulling their capital together. Because in the book, you kind of focus on America as itself. So looking at Black African people in a global sense, kind of as Dr. Clark put it, where do you see it as where we must go, or how do you wrestle with that? Because clearly, as you mentioned, we were something before we were race to become Black people. Like, how do you deal with that?
I'm sorry to be so dissatisfying. I don't know. You know, it's just so funny. After that first class, I was sitting with my buddy Rachel. We went to have lunch. And she was like questioning something that I had in my latest story on mass incarceration. And she was talking about the predicament of Black folks in Canada and incarceration. And I had no answer for her. The way I work as a writer is I'm not an expert on Black people, right? I could not tell you as much about mass incarceration as I can right now had I not spent the last year writing that article. I couldn't tell you as much as I can right now about the housing policy and how that plays into white supremacy as I can right now had I not actually spent the time studying and writing the article. And see, this is like, I think, really, really important actually for you guys to get. I don't want to be rude, but when people stand up here and they have answers to everything, you should be suspicious.
Yeah.
And you should be deeply skeptical. Because here's the thing. I mean, one of the things that immediately became clear to me at Howard University, you know, is that it takes time to understand these things. Like, it's just actually so, and I'm talking about to understand it in a deep way. I don't mean to stood up and say, you know, anybody, like, certainly 2 years ago, I could have stood up here and recited a bunch of facts about incarceration. I could have done that, and I could have, told you this is oppression of Black people, and everybody would have clapped, and that would have been nice, right? Maybe not here, but, you guys actually are kind of thorough, so maybe not here. Maybe not here, but like you could do that. There are people that do that, you know what I mean? And they're catch-all experts on everything, and they're drawing all of these connections and, this, that, and the third, and they're telling you, what this means and all these illusions. But the question is, does an expert in the field that they're pulling from actually believe them? That's always the standard. And so, you're asking me a question I could give you an emotional answer for, a raw answer for, one that, is basically the kind of answer I would give if I was sitting around having beers with one of my buddies, or sitting around having coffee in the morning with my wife. But that's not a thorough answer rooted in any sort of scholarship at all. I just haven't done it yet. So there's somebody here that can give you a great answer to that. I guarantee you, you don't even need to hear me on that. There's somebody here who will give you a very, very thorough answer on that. I'm not that person yet.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Lila. I'm a biology major, chemistry, math, double minor from Atlanta, Georgia. And my question is, you've already identified that at Howard we have something different. The students that you see on the yard and that travel through Howard's campus, we have something different within us. And my question to you is, how do we step away from recording history and start changing history? Because we've recorded it so much over the years that we haven't found a solution that's going to stick. And like you said, we here at Howard change things. And I know from the people that I've met here, we are going to change things. So how do you think that we should open that discussion to get our peers into finding a solution to what our ancestors and even you have recorded for us?
Well, I think your question privileges the changing over the recording, and actually the recording is an essential part of the changing. My job is to document. What comes after that is not really what I do, but it's an essential portion of it. If you listen to Martin Luther King give his speech at the end of at the end of the Selma campaign. I'm sorry, I'm tired and jet lagged. It's like 5 things. It's the how long, not long speech. How long, not long. If you listen to that, he gives this beautiful, dissertation or this beautiful discussion of Jim Crow and how it divided, the classes, the white working class from, black folks. And I can't remember the book he's citing. I am so tired. I should be better than this. But he's citing a very famous, I think it's The Strange Career of Jim Crow that he might be citing from. I think that's what it is. But he gives this beautiful, lecture that's rooted in it. And that undergirds his ability to actually go and change things, And so I don't know. I think the recording is a very, very important part of it. The second portion of that is I think you have to understand that the struggle is long. The struggle is long. The struggle against enslavement in this country was, it was a 250-year struggle. And so even the search for like an immediate solution in your lifetime, the first thing is that probably will not happen. I think with great certainty I can say that you probably will not find, because better people than you struggled with it. You know what I mean? And got shot in the head for it, frankly. You know what I mean? Folks have been looking for that smarter people, braver people, more intelligent people, than us have struggled with it. And the best they've been able to do is to chip a little bit away. And that's probably what we'll do. That's probably about the best that we can do. But that's not a, I don't say that in a condescending way. That's not a small thing. That's how it actually happens. That's the actual historical process. And your job is to be comfortable with that, to accept that what you're going to do is you're going to make your contribution. Children are going to make theirs, grandchildren are going to make theirs, great-grandchildren, and it will continue on and on and on. And if there's a place where this, great sort of architecture of white supremacy eventually falls, that's how it's going to happen. It's going to be 1,000 multi-generational cuts. It's not going to be one, quick sword swipe. That's not an argument for complacency. I want to be really, really clear about that. You know what I mean? But I think you have to act in spite, of the constant opposition and in spite of the, okay, that's the silver bullet, that's the solution, that'll get it right there.
Yes.
Hello.
Hi.
First of all, thank you for coming. I read your book. It's basically everything that I've been thinking about, given what's going on in the country for young black men. The student over there asked my question. So I just have a question. How does it feel to write the Black Panther as a comic book fan?
They ain't gonna leave that alone,
There's so many comic book fans. This is incredible. I was like, Jesus, I didn't know there's this many people. People care more about that than like the book, Revelation. Everybody's talking about the comic book. It feels very scary.
Oh, I'm sorry. There are probably maybe 3 or 4 people in here who don't know what you're talking about.
Sorry. Okay,
No,
yeah.
I'm thinking about my father who saw me waste money for 30 years.
I got contracted recently to write a comic book for Marvel, and it's actually the first black superhero to be in one of the big books, Marvel or DC. This is crazy. I'm shocked y'all even care. It's kind of wild. Anyway, it's the Black Panther, T'Challa's the prince and king of the mythical nation of Wakanda in Africa. He's a very, very revolutionary, interesting, character that, he's invented by some white folks, but, very, very, for the time, positive portrayal. I mean, he was, super smart, and, it's not like the stereotypical portrayal of black folks. It feels deeply scary because I don't know if I can do it or not. I'm not, convinced that it's going to turn out all great, but there's nothing worth writing that you are convinced is going to turn out great. I was not convinced this book would turn out great either. And so I'm a great distance away from all the pride and the happiness and all the joy and all of that. I'm in the muck right now. And as I said earlier, I'm just trying to make sure it doesn't suck. That's all I'm trying to do. That's all I'm trying to do. I'm just trying not to embarrass myself and embarrass y'all. That's like my standard right there. You know what I'm saying? And there's nothing wrong with that. There's not great things happen when you're realistic about that sort of approach. So that's about it.
Thank you.
Layla, you got the last one over here, and then we can squeeze you.
Hi, I'm Layla West. I'm a senior English major, Africana Studies minor from Chicago, Illinois, again. And my question, it's kind of rooted in an analogy, so stay with me. In the book, you repeat a lot that our spirit exists with and is housed by our bodies. So if I can extend that and say that the Mecca as a space for exchange and power exists within this Howard University. So we struggle for the protection for our body through conscious efforts that are historically aware and honor our ancestors. Do you believe that our institution, represented by its current leadership, is consciously struggling for liberation?
That was a shady question.
You know what? I just got here. I'm serious. I'm being real about that. I'm being real. I came to homecoming like 2 years ago. I came on campus to shoot something when the book first came out in July. And before that, I had not been back here in like 10 years. I sent my donation. I love Howard University. But I am so unequipped to answer that question. And again, I just, there's a way, I could say something right now that could make all your peers cheer. I could do that, right? That's one thing I could do, That would not be a sincere answer. It would not be actually deep. What time have I spent studying, this administration? What time have I spent reporting out what the finances are at Howard University right now? How much time have I spent looking at that? None. All I can speak to you, about right now is, what I get and what my feeling was and what my experience was. At the same time, I hope you don't take that answer to say that your questions are illegitimate. That's the kind of question that I was asking when I was here in 1993. That's exactly that. I would have got up here and said the same thing, but I would just throw that back at you and say that's for you to decide and for you to make known. You're here. It's your Howard,
Thank you.
Wow. Thanks, Brother Coates. And again, yes, it's been a long day. No, absolutely. I did see, and I know, look, he's been extremely gracious with his time. And Dr. Williams reminded we started a little early, so please go right ahead. And I have the remaining questions from the folks who were in line here on these cards, so maybe we can summarize a couple and then we can kind of wrap it up if that's all right with you. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. My name is Lola Delia. I'm an alumna of the School of Communications 2014 and a second-year law student at Howard University School of Law. And my question relates to Black professionals coming up in the times that we're living in now, specifically in the legal field. How exactly are we supposed to, in essence, make ourselves relevant and I guess be able to make a change in a profession that's dominated by white males with all the racial injustices that essentially stem from my profession, from the profession that I want to go into? How exactly are we supposed to, as conscious Black people, make sure that we're doing our due diligence, but also I don't want to say conforming, but kind of conforming to the point that we can still rise to success to be able to make a change. Because there's only one Marilyn Mosby right now. She's only in Baltimore City, but there's cities across the globe that don't have that type of representation. But she did something to make sure that she could rise to that level to be able to do that. But it doesn't seem like there's a blueprint for that. And I don't know if you can help me answer that question, but it's something that's been on my heart.
Well, I can only tell you what I did. I tried to do two things, right? I tried to sharpen my sword, and tried to become the best, I could be at what I did, and make sure I was ready for, any folks that, would come over into the territory that I was interested in and be ready. And then, I dedicated that sword to my people. That was really all I could do, Everything after that, everything after that, is really, really outside of, my control. I can only be the best soldier I can be. You know what I mean? And that's my humble contribution. And I think, I would urge you towards the same thing, I think. Law is a craft in and of itself. If I were in your position, I probably would think, hey, how can I be the baddest lawyer going? And then after that, how can I make that serve not just to line my pockets, but to, serve the issues that I'm deeply concerned about. That's not an ultimate answer. That's not an answer that's going to solve all your problems. But it is one that allows at least me to sleep at night. And that's like very, very important. The sanctity of your own soul, your own consciousness. To know that, no matter what happens, like, I tell people this all the time. Listen, should the world tilt over the edge and all the horrible things that we fear actually happen, when the scales are balanced and they look at, who was on the side of people pushing the world over the edge, and who's on the side of people trying to keep the world from being pushed over the edge. I want to be in that latter group.
No question.
That's all I can do. After that, what else is there?
No question.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lola. All right, we have the provost here, Brother Coates, who's going to make a final presentation. But before we do, I will just evoke some of these questions in a broad sense. James June, freshman art major from Indianapolis, Indiana, asks, in the context of Howard being the Mecca, what exactly would you replicate from your experience to benefit America or the world as a whole and kind of instill and create that hope in folks, which might even include some of the dreamers that you experienced here?
Probably the deep skepticism. Just an incredible skepticism, man. Everybody. This started in my dad's house. So, like, I was, like my dad, being involved in the Panthers. And so I think, like, this is hard for you guys to get being here, but I guess maybe it's not because you went to public school or other places. The average American is raised in their country to believe that their country is always right, that their country was touched by God, that everything's great. The analogy would be like if I were raised in my family to believe that, all of my family were angels and everything they had did was always great. And I was descended from these people who everything they did was always correct. And even the mistakes they made were, ultimately in the service of greatness and thus should be forgiven and overlooked. Well, that was just not the education I got here. It was deeply skeptical education, I can remember, me and my buddy Ben was over here, being in, Dr. Hayward's Central Africa class, and God, she would say this to us all the time, you bring your facts, I'll bring mine. And we can have a debate. We can go, I got my sources here, you bring your sources, and then we can have, a fight about it. And that, I gotta tell you, that skepticism is actually deeply painful. And I talk about that in the book. It's actually not, because it wasn't just skepticism of America, it was also skepticism of my, the notions that I brought, about what black people were and what that meant. And you were just really, really pushed. And it's a hard thing to do. And to the extent that I think, you find, white Americans who, sort of reject some of the things that, seem obvious to us, it's because what you're asking them to do is to be skeptical of their very identity. And that's hard. It was hard for me, as a black person to hear, but if I could, I think that is a great contribution to citizenship. Because where you come out at the end of the day is not that, at least where I came out, was not that, America's worse than other nations, that, it should be burnt to the ground, but that America is a country built by fallible humans. Like all other countries, it has, the problems are manifested here in a specific way, but to reject that idea of exceptionalism, that just was so key. And I think there's a great deal that, the rest of the country could learn from that.
It's very powerful, brother. And the fact that you do that from the Atlantic, that's right, y'all can clap. Absolutely. Please. The fact that you do that from the platform that you do it from is really not only an act of courage, but it's an act of courage fortified by that collective essence, that dark energy, because you're not alone. That having been said, the amount of criticism that leaves you open to, and I think about what you said when the white lady bumped into Samora when he was 4 years old. The one dimension of the dream being the idea that it literally allows people to control the body. I think if you extend that from its literal interpretation to the metaphor, your presence at the Atlantic is almost an open invitation for dreamers to attack the body, the collective black body, and that kind of perpetual attack on you creates a kind of circumstance that requires us to rally around you, and not just you as an individual, but you as an example of the type of courage we have to demonstrate. So I think that's very interesting that you would answer that way. I'm looking at these questions. You kind of talked about the dream, and the responsibility that we have here at Howard and at other black colleges to protect student voice. There's a question here about the red, black, and green flag, and so that deep skepticism is very important. There's a question about gender, and of course you talked to the students a lot about that today. How your text, which empties out as a conversation between a man and his son, which you bring gender in. There was a conversation today about the gender dimension in black women. Could you say maybe a little bit about that? And then we're going to invite a professor, well, yeah, he's a professor as well, but our provost, Dr. Wutaw, up to lay a little something on you, brothers.
Well, I think like probably, one of the more interesting criticisms, and I would say within, the African-American community, within the community of African-American thinkers and writers, is that, this book is insufficient in terms of how it deals with black women. You're welcome. We'll wait for the rest of it, though. I'm joking. This book is necessarily limited by its author. It's 150 pages. Its author is a black male talking to another black male. When I wrote it, made a conscious effort to, think as much as I could about, black people in the most expansive and broadest sense possible. But this is not the explanation, the end-all, be-all explanation of black life in America. It just was never meant to be that, and any book that's supposed to do that will ultimately fail. One of the fortunate but unfortunate things that happened, it was fortunate, but it was a byproduct of this. As a writer, you're like when the brother asked me about Black Panther, you're in the process of creation. All you're trying to do is try to, make something that's, halfway decent. And then you put it out, and you see the response. And the response that this book got was shocking and overwhelming and incredible. I mean, it had a level of success that just was not anticipated for. And so it was on people's lips, and it was on people's mouths. And in a lot of cases, people who don't regularly talk about books written by black people and about the black experience. And so what that created, I think, was this impression that, you want to understand black people, you go read Between the World and Me, and that got it. Well, yeah, the book is going to fall short in many, many ways if you decide to do that. My answer to that question has always, pretty much been that the problem, is not, and, I'm sorry to say this, is not with Between the World and Me, it's the fact that there aren't enough Between the World and Me's. And, that really, that's the issue, I think, if you read this book and you stop and you don't read Toni Morrison and you don't read Isabel Wilkerson, and you don't expand your mind and read other folks who are doing this, if you don't look at the fact that I'm in a very, very unique situation in terms of who I have as my editor, being an African American who came up in the same way, and you don't look at the fact that that is not normal in the publishing world, then it can lead you to believe that this book for some magical reason is just a standoff. I got very, very fortunate in being able to publish this book the way it is. Because there's not more like it, has been forced to assume a kind of weight that it never would have. It never should have, in fact. As I was saying earlier, my first book is much more male than this book. I mean, I think it's literally called Two Fathers, a Son. I mean, it's a very, very, black male book. It got no such criticism like this. Well, it also sold like a fractional amount of the copies of this. Nobody read it, so, who cared? You say whatever you want if ain't nobody reading you. You can do whatever you want.
Some East folk read it.
Thank you. Thank you, but that was just not, a critique that I got. But this book, it went, it was held up as representative. I'm sorry that happened. I am deeply, deeply sorry. It's unfair to you, it's unfair to the book, it's unfair to black people, because no such book can be representative in that way. I want the book to stand on its own, as what it is. That small particular thing is that one sliver of black life that does, illuminate some greater things. But then after that, there should be other books like it, hopefully written by, folks that are standing, sitting in this room right now.
You told the students that, so you're saying in addition to reading, absorbing all these texts, the next step is to create some text.
That's exactly it. That really is exactly it. And also to engage in the text that's already there, that maybe didn't get the publicity that this book got, because it's there. Yeah. It's definitely, there's a lone footnote in this book, and it's to this great historian down at Duke, this black woman by the name of Thavolia Glimph, who is an incredible, incredible historian who wrote this book called Out of the House of Bondage, that is all about the violence that white mistresses perpetrated against black women who were serving in slavery. It was actually deeply, deeply influenced this book. Folks should read the Thavolia Glimph. Don't stop there. And folks should read other folks. And so I think And you can probably sense this in some of my answers to the questions here. I am adamantly opposed to being a spokesman for black people. I don't want no part of it. You don't need me to do that. You don't need anybody at all being a singular spokesman for you. And I don't want this book being, a stand-in for folks who think that they can understand the black experience. I'm sorry it's being perceived that way. I've argued against that every time I've had the microphone. I'm arguing against it right now. What we need is more. That's the answer.
Ty, let me say very quickly, just you wouldn't have any reason to know this, but about a month ago, Ishmael Reed was here with his new book on Muhammad Ali. And we sat down and had a talk, and he talked to the students, and he said the exact same thing. When they elevate a representative type, what is the obligation of that person to say, you see me, but there are so many more?
Yeah,
and so in many ways, it's almost like you answered the challenge that he laid, which is, you're there now, brother, and for you to say that too is a very...
Well, honestly, it's quite selfish. It's selfish because you can't create any art under that sort of burden. All the art you're going to create, if you are trying to represent, if that's the burden that you assume, you will always be inferior. You just always will. If you are, listen, the Invisible Man comes out of Ralph Ellison.
No question.
That's Ellison. That's who that is. That is not a stand-in for black people. Their eyes are watching God, Jonas Gorvine, that comes out of Zora Neale. That's who she is.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Beloved is who Toni Morrison is. It has to, you read, Joan Didion's, the White Album. That's Joan Didion. That's only that's not all women. That's not all white women. That's Joan Didion's perspective on the world. And that's the only way you can create art.
Was it just coincidental? Because you named everybody except the last author was HBCU, Ellison, Tuskegee, and then the rest of them were Howard.
Right.
Very interesting. Marilyn Mosby, Tuskegee. It's a common theme.
Right.
Anyway.
But if you assume that kind of burden, you will quickly destroy yourself, and you will destroy any power and any sort of relevance that your literature has.
Well, brother, you say you're not a teacher, but I think we can all agree that what we've been witnessing is a master class. Your craft, you're practicing your craft, brother. And in fact, I would ask Dr. Anthony K. Wutaw, the provost of Howard University, and we have a number of the faculty is here. We have a number of deans. We have a great number of the Howard University staff, the folks who work every day, in addition to majority being students. Professor Wutaw, you have something for soon-to-be Professor Coates?
Wow. Please join me in giving another round of applause to Ta-Nehisi Coates. Before I make this presentation, I want to acknowledge a few people. First, Trustee Marie Johns is in the audience. Trustee Johns, if you don't mind standing and being acknowledged. And also, I'd like for Ta-Nehisi's parents to please stand and be acknowledged. If you want to see where he comes from and where the great works of his mind come from, there you go. So we have a presentation that I would like to make on behalf of Howard University, and if you would indulge me for a few minutes, I will just read this. And it reads, Howard University Citation of Achievement to Ta-Nehisi Coates, October 7th, 2015. Ta-Nehisi Coates, internationally celebrated journalist, blogger, and award-winning author, brings personal reflection and historical scholarship to bear on America's most complicated issues. A national correspondent for The Atlantic magazine, Mr. Coates' work has been published by The Village Voice, The Washington City Paper, The Washington Post, The New York Times Magazine, Time Magazine, and The New Yorker. Born in West Baltimore, Maryland, to W. Paul Coates and Cheryl Waters Hassan, Ta-Nehisi Coates was raised in a close-knit family that imbued him with a respect for history, social justice, and intellectual achievement. His appreciation for reading and writing was instilled at an early age by his father, a former librarian at Howard University's Moreland Spingarn Research Center and founder of Black Classic Press, and his mother, a teacher who made Ta-Nehisi write essays as discipline for bad behavior. Well done. His early life also includes study at Howard as a history major from August 1993 until May 1999. In announcing the 2015 Genius Grant recipients, the MacArthur Foundation described Ta-Nehisi as a writer who interprets complex and challenging issues and embeds the present into historical analysis to illustrate how the implications of the past are still experienced by people today. His first book, The Beautiful Struggle, A Father, Two Sons, and an Unlikely Road to Manhood, was nominated for an NAACP Image Award for Outstanding Literary Work, Debut Author. His second book, Between the World and Me, was selected as one of 10 finalists for the National Book Award for Nonfiction and received a rare endorsement by Nobel laureate Toni Morrison, who compared his work to that of James Baldwin. Howard University proudly commends and applauds Ta-Nehisi Coates for his inspiring achievements as an author who bears witness to life in America and writes candidly and courageously about his observations and experiences. He is a powerful exemplar for other young men and women. We wish him continued success in his quest for excellence in truth and service. Stacy Mobley, Chairman, Board of Trustees. Wayne A.I. Frederick, President of Howard University.
All right, so everyone, we will now conclude this part of our program. The Howard University Bookstore has copies of Ta-Nehisi Coates' book, Between the World and Me. If you have already purchased a copy and you wish to get that copy signed, there are a number of signed copies available in the lobby. Some folks probably already gone out and start buying them. The folks here in Cramton Auditorium have given us the following instruction. You will line up here, stage right, to your right, come up those steps. We're going to have a table here, Ta-Nehisi, for you to sign anything that hasn't been signed.